What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTP Sports. We're doing something a little different today. Granted, I'm not home, so I figured I'd get something out for you here. Eagles, Brodes is also here, my boss, my good friend, whatever you want to call him. And we all know from his daily life, he's very broken about the Eagles right now. So I guess we can call this a little bit of therapy for him, try to get something off of his mind out. Whatever we're going to do over the next 25, 30 minutes here, it'll be a big therapy session for you. So, Hunter, you're still broken, I'm assuming?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is terrible. It's even worse than I thought it would be the day after. And I'm a little surprised by, and I'm just basing this off of some Twitter polls or whatever, so take it for what it is. But when asked, how do you feel about this game? Are you more encouraged? Are you more disappointed? There's been a lot of positive talking about this group. And look, I get it. They were banged up, and you lose Lane and you lose all these bodies mid-game, and you're on the road and you can't score and all this stuff. I get it. I get it. It is a solid victory in that respect, but you can't lose sight of what has transpired since last year's downfall. And it's the same. It's literally the same exact thing. And what I'm not going to do is be fooled by the same thing again. Like I got fooled last year, and I was willing to just say it's great that you're coming out victorious when you shouldn't, and there's a skill set to that. But I'm watching it again, and I just can't be fooled again. I'd be an idiot to do it, so I can't. So yes, I'm broken. Where do you stand now? I don't know if you're as hurt as I am. What's your vibe?
I'm not as broken as you are, but the road that I go down is on a similar path to you. Not to the very extreme now. It's the fact that, yes, obviously yesterday it's a good win to figure out with all the injuries. Dallas Goedert's, 170 yards. That was fantastic. Saquon's performance in the second half, that was fantastic. The defense was absolutely spectacular last night. You can't give them enough credit. But it just leaves that sour taste in the mouth when you look at some of the play calling, you look at the fourth down plays, specifically those fourth down plays at the end of the first half and to start the second half. Also, for some reason, for some way in hell, Nick Sirianni decided to go for a 60-yard field goal. I have no idea why he does that. And then Jalen Hurts' decision making. It's the same constant problems week after week after week, dating back to last season.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, you're
very
right.
hard to even get excited about it because when are these problems going to be fixed? Because they feel like they're never going to be fixed at this rate.
Right. No, I agree. And let's expand on it further. So I acknowledge that the interior of the defensive line looked way better, right? And they removed Bryce Huff, and wow, what do you know? The defensive ends got better. We could get more into that a little later on. But I guess my point is to simplify it. While there are areas of this team that looked better. Dallas Goedert finally shined, and Barkley is a beast, and your offensive line stepped up with a lot of injuries. So there's so much to that. But when my biggest questions stem from the head coach and the quarterback, that's all you need to know. If my quarterback was insanely talented and insanely great and playing as good as Jalen Carter played, then if I have a hole at linebacker, I don't care. I do, but you get my point. That's not on the list of the top tier of the list. Your quarterback and head coach, that is number one and number two, need to be synced week in and week out, day in and day out. And right now, it doesn't seem like those two are synced up. And not only that, I don't think Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni are synced up, and that's a problem from Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie's view. So I think my bigger issues sort of with the higher ups and the most important pieces of the franchise, it's so confusing to me, and that not being on the same page is way more impactful to the wins and losses than did your defensive line get home, even if they took a significant jump in New Orleans, if all that makes sense.
Oh, it does 100% make sense. And every time I just looking back at it, it just goes right to Jalen Hurts and the way that he is playing. Yeah, his stats from yesterday's game may look better than it has been in previous weeks. He has over 300 yards. He makes a lot of completions and everything like that. But I'm not sure how to describe it. If it looks like he panics in the pocket where it looks like he has so much time and space and then he just holds on for the ball for way too long, or it's when his struggles is throwing the ball over the middle of the field, and that happened on the play where he tried to throw it to Devontae Smith in the end zone, ended up being an interception, and for some reason people wanted to blame Devontae Smith on that play. But it's really hard to blame your wide receivers where Jalen Hurts has 5 turnovers over the first 3 games. That's kind of very hard, including the fumble when he has running to his left and no one's really even touching his arms. He just drops the ball as he falls to the ground. And that is something that is just happening week after week after week. And it's becoming an issue because you cannot win in the NFL. You cannot compete for Super Bowls. You cannot even get to the NFC Championship game if you're getting quarterback play like this. And Jalen Hurts, it's becoming a major issue at this point.
I believe this is what Jalen Hurts is going to be. The year where he wasn't turning the rock over at all, that's not the norm. Now, you're still going to get phenomenal plays out of Jalen. When he checks at the line of scrimmage to create what was Dallas Goedert's play because he sees there's motion, then he realizes what the coverage is, and then he attacks and changes things up. That's great. And I'll even give him credit. It was a play that didn't work, and I believe it was Kenny Gainwell, but he recognized something at the line of scrimmage. He checked to it. It was a quick throw to Gainwell, and he got beat. He got beat with the mental chess game and all, but it's more of the ideas of him recognizing blitzes differently and recognizing packages, and that's an area pre-snap that he really needed to work on. So I'll give him credit just from that sense, and he'll continue to improve with it. So you'll get that from Jalen. That's a big-time step. I just think at this point, he's going to make incredible plays, dating back to their win against Green Bay, the pass to Saquon in the end zone, A.J. Brown to start the first half. That game against the Saints, they were moving the ball. They were getting a lot of opportunities to score. It was just poor decision-making by Nick to get points and whatnot. It's going to be not the same exact way, and I've labeled this before. It's going to be similar to the Josh Allen experience, not the same cannon, not the same wow plays, but you're going to have to live with greasy, ugly-ass turnovers, and it just comes down to, can you still win games with those ugly turnovers? He's going to turn the rock over. Now, Josh Allen is right there at the top of the AFC every year. If there was no Pat Mahomes, he'd probably be going farther. Maybe you can win with that if other pieces surrounding the quarterback are solid, but I think we have to change the mentality and the expectations of Jalen. He is going to throw interceptions. He is going to fumble the football. He's not as clean as he was a few years back. And then, we have to start asking questions. Is that sustainable? And I guess we'll find out.
I was even going to bring up that point that you mentioned, comparing him to Josh Allen. And I think right now, with the way that the team is starting to get banged up, and honestly, at that point, it's a godsend that the bye week is after the Buccaneers week, because, Devontae Smith getting absolutely popped by 3 people, then getting spit on. That was absolutely disgusting. We still don't know when A.J. Brown's going to come back. Now, Lane Johnson's in, concussion protocol, and he most likely is not going to play next week. And we already know what the Eagles' record is when Lane Johnson doesn't play, and that's kind of scary at the end of the day. So that's where my main concern comes in, is because you don't have the safety valve now of AJ. You don't have the safety valve possibly of Devontae. Now, is Dallas Goedert going to have this type of game every single week? No, that's not sustainable whatsoever. But is it going to be incorporated more? He should have been in the first 2 weeks before this, but he's going to have to be forced at this point. And I think now, with the way Saquon played yesterday actually, he needs to touch the ball more. And I'm not sure if this is just a Kellen Moore thing, where he just completely avoids the run game in the first half, because that was just very odd to see just no action from Saquon in the first half whatsoever. And I'm not sure if that's a Kellen Moore thing. I'm not sure if that was just something they were planning with the Saints. I don't know what it is. Could you explain that? I have no idea.
Well, it's probably a part of the Kellen Moore experience, because we in town all go, yes, Kellen Moore, A+, phenomenal. And it is. He's a good offensive coordinator. But there's no way, if he was so ridiculous with 0 flaws, that the Dallas Cowboys would move on from him and allow Mike McCarthy to run the show, or the Chargers. Different situation. They're bringing in Jim Harbaugh from Michigan. That's your big splash. You're going to let him bring in his own staff or whatever. So I think Kellen Moore is an above average offensive coordinator in the NFL, but it comes with some flaws. And I'm learning on the fly just like everybody else. I never studied Kellen Moore's offense when he's with the Chargers the same way I study a Philadelphia Eagles-led offense. I ain't got the time. So when he's here, I'm starting now to get a grasp of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if you spoke to Dallas fans, if they said, yeah, it was annoying. Sometimes Zeke would be on a surge, and he would just not use him, or Zeke would run for 120 yards the week before, and then the first quarter he had 0 touches until midway through the second quarter. Now, I don't know if that's the case. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that's something that we learn about Kellen Moore, which is the obvious: give Saquon Barkley the ball, and he waits a little too long to do it. I'm just kind of speaking out loud, though, and I'm just trying to figure it out on the fly like everybody else. But I wouldn't be surprised by the end of the year if one of our concerns with Kellen Moore is just he doesn't dig into Saquon at certain points when he should. It takes him a little too long to get him the ball. Something around that narrative. It wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I definitely can see that 100%. And if we're even going into next week against the Buccaneers, who lost to the Denver Broncos out of all people, I saw your skate take and you took Buccaneers on the money line. I'm sure you got pissed off after that.
It's a joke. I am doing horrendous. Skate takes, I was on such a high. All right, I was doing so well. Before I actually made the actual content, I'm saying, that's what made the trigger go off in my mind, say, dude, why don't we play into this a little bit? And now I'm on the coldest streak ever. But that's betting. All right, there's only one way to go from here. We're only going up. So you got to start hopping on the skate takes.
So who did you take today on skate takes?
Today, well, we are recording this Monday. Don't know when you're uploading this. We have Monday Night Football, 2 games. I went Buffalo Bills at home, and I went Cincinnati Bengals at home, and then I sprinkled a tiny bit of Philly's money line to shut the door for the division. And we'll see if I get screwed or not. There's a high probability that this doesn't hit. So fade me. That's all. If you want money, you can go the other way. Yeah, I'm here for the people.
I mean, who knows? You go on luck streaks, you go on cold streaks. And you just said it right here. You're in a massive cold streak. And it feels like with just going to Nick Sirianni right now, this dude, I feel like he's coaching to get fired at the end of the day, unless he knows he's getting fired, because I'm still thinking about it. I thought about it 5 hours after the game. I thought about it this morning. I'm thinking about it right now. What the fuck was going for 60-yard field goal? I don't know what the idea was there. And I think that was the play you mentioned before that. I think that was the play where Jalen, tried to quick throw it over to Kenny Gainwell. He got beat a little bit there. Nothing happened. Why not just run it a little bit to make it even easier for
I'll tell you why. Because he's not calling plays, rightfully so. Kellen Moore is. But when he does put his fingerprints on it, he's not calling the 3rd down play, but he knows what he wants to do on the 4th down play. So there's miscommunication here where Kellen Moore is thinking one thing on 3rd, not knowing, I guess, that Sirianni would kick it for the 60-yarder. If that's the case, then as you alluded to, you make it 54 yards, you make it 53 yards, make it 55 yards, because 55 yards and 60 yards is a massive difference for a kicker. That's where the incompetence of this coaching staff and the way it was structured, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And, to your original question of is Nick Sirianni coaching to get fired right now? This is what I think it is from that angle. He only right now is able to go for it on 4th down. That seems to be what his role is. All offseason, what's he going to do? What does it say you do here? What do you do? What do you do? Well, we've learned through a couple of weeks, unless there's some things happening behind the scenes, which I'm not ruling out either.
Probably is.
Yeah, probably is. Probably is. But from what we know right now, it seems he can step in on 4th down and say what he wants to do. Well, if that happens 3 times a game, I think he's trying to make his presence felt to show that he's doing something. And it's probably taking him out of character. He made a comment, I forget which press conference it was, about how he does his research. He goes, I do my research. I have my numbers. And I'm going, that's weird, because Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman spend a lot of money on the analytical data. So for him to talk about his numbers and his number crunching, it's almost like he's doing something all on his own. Kellen Moore is doing whatever he wants. And then Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie have their own analytical department, and that's all out of whack. So once again, a ton of miscommunication and a ton of uncomfortableness, if that even makes sense, up at the top of this franchise with all the leaders of each side of the ball and the head coach and the GM. Sloppy. It's sloppy. And I think that correlates to what we see on the field at times.
Yeah, and that also goes to the fact that, directly, like right when we're recording this, or before we recorded this is when Nick Sirianni had his, day after press conference. And, Zach Berman, he posted on here one of the quotes that stood out probably most, because Nick really didn't really say much in this game, for today that stood out. But he said, every time we go for it on fourth down, I'm doing what I think is best for the football team in that particular time. I'm not going to make it a weekly habit of explaining it to you guys. So it's just, I don't think a 60-yard field goal is the best possible time for that, man.
So I listened to it, and essentially the other week he was asked something about the fourth down, and would you think, if you could go back in time, would you do it differently? And he essentially spoke for 7 minutes and didn't say anything. And he was essentially saying, like, I would do it different. The way I interpreted it is he talked in circles, gave us a bunch of vomit, said literally nothing, which is what he does almost every answer. And by saying that he's not going to do this every week, I'm not going to tell you how I feel, he told us how he felt. Because if he was going to stay with his guns and say, I'd do it again, you would just say, I'd do it again. So the fact that he's dancing in circles, I'm not going to make this an every week habit, I'm not going to tell you everything that I'm thinking. Well, of course, you would have done it differently. It shows that he went back, reflected, and didn't like it. And maybe that's a good thing. Like, listen, the play was stupid. If you watched it again and you feel on those fourth downs, you do it again, I'd say, Jesus Christ, what? So some look at that as weak. You're not sticking to your beliefs. Dude, last night I almost blew my blood cells out of my body. Today, when I do a show a little later on, it's a different day, different feel. If you go back and see that you made mistakes mid-game, I got no problem with the coach admitting that he probably would do things differently, but he just didn't want to admit it. Or he didn't want to say the words, but he actually admitted it organically without even realizing. It's probably what happened with Nick. His answers. Woof.
It takes 7 minutes to even get close to even answering that. Is it even worth the time to even think about that at that point?
Listen, I don't know. The Nick Sirianni press conferences you take in bunches. Once they started talking about the growth of Johnny Wilson, I said, I'm out. The growth on Johnny Wilson. After everything that happened in that game, I'll tell you what I'd shove up someone's ass, if that even makes sense. The growth of Johnny Wilson. I don't care. I'm done.
But come on, what about the most important one, Coach Dan? So what? So what? Now what? Come on.
Dan. Oh my God. Oh. And I'm getting ripped on Twitter from Coach Dan's. I guess Coach Dan is a famous coach in Cherry Hill. You're an NFL football coach, right? My point is, because if you're unfamiliar with the situation, Nick Sirianni postgame said that he learned something from his son's baseball coach. And it was, do you remember the quote exactly?
I have just, so what, now what?
That's it. Yes. So what, now what? When something bad happens, so what, now what? And he was explaining that to the media, and like, I'm not ripping that motto. If you're a coach and you're coaching baseball and you got kids and you got teenagers and you got guys that are under 18, it's not a dumb life lesson. What I think is silly is being a head coach of 53 men that are professional athletes that get paid a lot of money. You can't treat them the same way you treat little kids. That's all. It's a different way of managing people. It's a different type of person. You can't manage a group of professional athletes the same way you manage little kids in baseball. I'm sorry. It's not the same. Someone tried telling me, whoa, you learned so much. The parents. I'm like, okay, so little Jimmy's mother, who's an accountant, and you managing that mother the way you are as a high school baseball coach, it's not the same as Jalen Carter and Bryce Huff. It's just not. So I think it's ludicrous to be an NFL head coach, to stand up there after a game and go, you know why we won? Because of what was it? You lose one, suck one? What was it?
So what, now what?
So what, now what? Come on. Does that inspire you if you're in the locker room? It's unbelievable.
I just thought of something very funny.
What?
That so we all saw on Twitter today, if follow Flyers, they brought in Coach Geek
Oh yeah,
for
Coach Keenan.
on ice practice and all that stuff. What if Nick Sirianni during practice week or anything like that before a game brought in Coach Dan? Give a little speech.
I thought you were going to tell me brought in Coach Gee. Then I'd do a 180. Be like, dude, that would be electric. Coach Dan? Oh, my God. So let me get this straight. The guy who has all of his duties stripped from him and no voice isn't speaking after game one's a win against Brazil. Or wait, was that against? No, that was against the Falcons after the loss. He didn't speak after the loss. And then in game 4, he's going to hypothetically bring in Coach Dan. What does he do?
Gonna fly him all the way to Tampa.
What does he do? What does Nick do? Now, obviously, we're just being tongue-in-cheek here. But guess what? I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Oh, we're going to see an Eagles video right before game day. Coach Dan quote, speech before the game. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. What? When John Clark says, I'm told that Nick Sirianni showed the team Kobe Bryant highlights. Like, I'm told that Nick Sirianni went to Cherry Hill West, went into the clubhouse, talked to Coach Dan prior to the game. C.J. Gardner-Johnson said this was the greatest pump-up speech of my life.
Oh, man.
Anyway, we can get back on track. I don't know what just happened.
That's what happens here.
I
Sorry. It just had to happen. But, just going back to the game and something else that also really stood out to me. And I think it's something that you brought up in yesterday's recap through all the stuff and also my editing purposes for your TikToks. It goes back to Jalen Carter's. He had a great game yesterday. Not going to deny that. Sidelines, though, that was very childish. And that really kind of pissed me off at the end. And I'm sure I remember it probably pissed you off at the same time.
It did. Yeah, it did. Yeah, I didn't like it. I seem to be living on an island a little bit just because he dominated. And I had fears even before that situation. I was talking to someone who's close to the team, and they kind of gave me an indication that he is a little bit on that immature side, which, okay, look. If you're 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, I'm almost 30 now. When I was 22, 23, I was an idiot. So I'm not telling you I was the smartest person in the world by any means at that time. And I get that. You don't have to be polished at 21, 22. You just need to progress and start to approach things differently. So by the time you're 26, 27, 28, you're taking steps in the right direction. The missing meetings thing was very, very, very unprofessional. Not that you don't oversleep. Yeah, we're human. Sometimes that happens. But it seems to follow Jalen Carter. This type of stuff and what you're hearing seems to follow Jalen Carter enough to know that there's probably a cause and an effect on why those little things keep happening with him more so than other people. And the getting hype on the sidelines. And Chris Long, for example, mentioned something about when you're at war and you're on the football field and when it's highly emotional, let the big man eat, let the big man cook, let him have it. He deserves that moment, especially after he was dominating. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I don't know. I think if it gets to the point where 4 people have to hold you back and the head coach is screaming sort of like, yo, calm down. Like your head coach is now on the sidelines focusing on what you're doing as you're attacking fans behind the bench. But here's another problem. Nick does that. So that's the head coach, once again, causing all this controversy. I didn't like it. I'm on an island with it. I don't know if I'm being too harsh or not. I don't know if I'm being biased because the whole Nick experience has somewhat soured on me, and I'm sure that's playing a role. But something's not right. We've all been around sports long enough to know when there's some areas that need to be cleaned up, or when there's more systemic problems, or, when maybe the team just doesn't click the way they should, even though there's a bunch of talent on paper, which we've seen with the Eagles a couple of different times, with the Dream Team, with the year after Doug Peterson won the Super Bowl. I'm not necessarily sure what's going on right now, but I don't think it passes the smell test for me. So take that for what it is, I guess.
I mean, I can fully see what you're talking about. And yeah, I know you throughout the entire offseason, you were preaching about all the stuff and the turmoil that was going on with the team. And a lot of people were getting pissed off because of that,
Hmm.
just because it was offseason talk. We shouldn't be worrying about this. We should be focused on getting excited for the season. And I wasn't in that boat, but I was like, okay, you collapsed last year. It was horrible. It was disgusting. Everything. Okay. Go in the training camp. You start preseason. You start the regular season. Full clean slate. Prove to me that what happened last year was an anomaly. Prove that to me that that was a one-time thing, and you can get back to what we expect you to be, because you're preaching Super Bowl. You're preaching winning and all that stuff, because that's the expectation we got to hold you to, because that's what you're preaching. And then when I see Jalen Hurts, interception on the first drive of Brazil, the fumbles, the turnovers, and all that crap. And then, bad decision making, everything. We're still hearing stuff from behind the scenes and everything. It's just like, oh my God. It's the same. It's the same. And it's hard to fully buy in, if
Yeah,
that makes
sure.
sense.
No, it does make sense. And I agree. It does feel a little bit of the same. And, as I project what they can be, they're never going to be, I don't think. And if it does become this, then wow. But their bad seasons are like last year was their bad season. They won 11 games. You know what I mean? So they're going to win football games. They are, but we are in a position where you can't say, well, don't take it for granted, or, hey, you're still going to win 9 games and sneak into the play. That's not the objective. That's not the goal. With this offense, with this talent, we'll never in our lives see more talent on the offensive side of the football than we do right now. Ever. Ever, ever, ever in an Eagles uniform. And if we do, kudos to whoever the general manager is. So the fact that this is the team, you have to pounce on that. And the goal is, to be like, this is the floor, 12-5. Like, I'm asking for 12-5, but not last year winning 11. It's got to have context surrounding it. This seems to be on trajectory to be kind of like last year's Buccaneers team. Pesty. They can beat you on a given week. Baker Mayfield might go off and have a big game. Jalen Hurts could go off and have a big game. I think Jalen Hurts is by far better than Baker Mayfield, but I think this team might be sort of that 9-10 win pesty squad that maybe nobody wants to run into because it could fall on a good week. But I demand more than that. And if I'm going to lower the bar and the expectation to that after what I saw 3 weeks into the year, and justifiably so based off of the production,
That's a letdown.
Yes, I'm not happy with that. I don't care that the Giants are good. Let me ask you this question, because what we constantly hear is, look around the league, everyone's sloppy, turnovers are happening all the time, blah, 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 blah. How much stock do you put into the NFC maybe not being as good as you thought? The Lions lost at home to the Bucs, and maybe the 49ers, like, they had a heartbreaker. So how much do you put into the rest of the league maybe not living up to expectations too, and comparing that to the Birds? Because I have a tough time doing it, but I understand people don't.
I can put a whole pot in itself talking about that stuff, because it also ties with my feelings about how Phillies fans are talking about the Phillies team right now. And I don't want to get into that entire thing, because I went on a whole pod last night being pissed off about that, because Phillies fans are saying the Phillies flaws outweigh everyone else. That's why they'll be a first round exit. But I'm not going to get into that deeply. I don't care that San Fran is struggling to start off. Yeah, they're dealing with injuries. I don't care that they're struggling. I don't care that Dallas is a laughing stock right now. I don't care that the Bengals always underachieve. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, all these guys, they preached this is a team that we expect to compete for a Super Bowl. And if I see my team go out there and completely underperform to our expectations, what else am I supposed to do? I'm not supposed to lower my expectations, because you put the expectations on yourself in the first place. We can't be like, oh, at least we're not as bad as this team, but look at that team. They're struggling too, so it gives us a little bit of a break. No, I want to be the outlier. I want to be the team that is standing above the others and just going out there dominating week after week. And yes, they're not going to dominate week after week. That's just not going to happen in the NFL. But you understand what I mean. Be that 12-win team. Be that 13-win team that gets a 2 seed, that gets a 1 seed, that you have a chance to go on a deep run. Slipping into the playoffs, it does
I know.
nothing for me.
I know. And I want to even expand further on that too, because one of the things that I haven't seen, and you kind of brought it up with the dominating week to week thing, and you're right. I mean, I get it. It's not going to be perfect every week, but if you date back to the teams that were really good with the Eagles over the recent runs, I guess there would be maybe a 5 or 6 week stretch of football where every time they touched the field, they were moving, they were churning, everything was delivered. You went into each week like we're winning this game. Like there's like no ifs, ands, or buts. But we are winning the football game. It's inevitable. These games that we've been seeing, the grind it out, ugly. How the hell did you win? How the hell did you lose?
It's annoying.
It's so bad, and that's not going to stop. So what I demand is, I want 5 weeks in a row where the team looks great. Yes. Where the team looks great week to week, and they're continuing to build off one another. And I'm not going to hide behind the fact that, like, they don't perform in this preseason anymore, so I got to give them all this time. I mean, we're going into week 4 now. Week 4. When does that die out? When does that finish up? After the first 3 weeks? Because in the past times, you had maybe a series in preseason game 1, a series in preseason game 2, a quarter in preseason game 3, and no one played game 4. That's 4 series. I mean, that's the first quarter of game 1. So we can't use that for all of the first month, because that's 7 times as many snaps as they would get in the preseason to get right. So really, after quarter number 2 of game 1, the whole preseason nonsense should be out the window. If we're just going based off of time and real snaps.
Yeah, and getting to one last point here, because I know you got to head out real quickly. But it's funny, going into this week, was there anybody in the Eagles fan base that was confident going into the Saints game? I had a conversation with my trainer at the gym, and he's always not confident in his team because it's a Philadelphia team. They're going to damper expectations. They're going to find a way to lose. That's what he was like last week against the Falcons, and he ended up being right. And it's just the fact that we both said this, and I think some other people said this too. The NFL is so weird that you have the Saints that are dominating in the first 2 weeks, scoring 40-plus points a game. They're going against the Eagles that got embarrassed last week. Somehow, in some way, the NFL gods are going to let the Eagles win this game. That's just the way it works, and it's just like, I can't rely on that.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to is, and I heard the same thing, because why are they going to win? Well, because it's the NFL. If I'm relying on crazy stuff happens and you never know, that's not enough for me to be excited. But we acknowledge that it's real. We acknowledge that that type of stuff does happen. The Panthers beat Vegas. I always fade the Panthers, and I stayed away because I had a feeling Andy Dalton. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay away from this thing. I'm uncomfortable, and I wish I trusted my gut, but I can never actually put money down on them. But, yeah, crazy stuff happens, and I get that. But you're right. I don't think your motto, here's Howie Roseman. Howie, Jeffrey, can you please give us a sort of a overview on how you're going to approach the season this year? Oh, thanks for asking, Broach. Great question. Crazy stuff happens. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Crazy stuff happens. You can't rely on that.
I'd be pissed off if he said that.
Well, he would never. He would never.
You never
he'd
know,
ramble. He'd ramble he'd ramble for 40 minutes just so we wouldn't have to ask Nick any questions for him to screw it up.
That is definitely true there at the end of the day. But we are getting to the end of this. I know you got to go somewhere. I hope your skate takes hit today with the Bills specifically, because I got Josh Allen on my fantasy team, and I am down by almost 29 points in the Brodes Fantasy League. So it says I'm projected to win just because I have Josh Allen and Cook for the Bills. Okay. So who are you going? What's your fantasy look like right now? So
for the Brodes Discord channel, I am sitting at 1-2. I'm losing. I lost this week for sure. 1-2, so not good. And for the big Hollydale group we got going on, I am also 1-2. But I started out 0-2, so big win this week. Ooh, big win this week. Yeah, hopefully that all hits at the end of the day. But Hunter, I appreciate you for joining tonight. Or today, whatever the time is, whenever this is fucking posted at the end of the day. It's going to be a long week. I'm down in Florida for this week at this point, so
I need the mental break from the Philadelphia sports first.
Yeah, I don't blame it. Now, are you going to be back before the Bucks game, or are you down there all weekend?
Weather dependent. I'm coming home on Friday night, and there's supposed to be a
Okay.
fucking tropical storm this weekend in Florida.
Oh, come on. Well, wait, you're leaving before then, though, right?
I go tomorrow. I come back Friday night. So,
and then the weekend is going to be the storm. So you'll miss the storm.
well, it's supposed to start on Thursday.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Thursday.
Okay.
So, all that
hey,
stuff.
I wish you the best of luck with you and your family on this trip.
I appreciate it. Hopefully, the Phillies clinch the bye week in the division at that point. Hopefully,
That's right.
They clinch it tonight.
That's right.
The fact there. So, we're going to end it here, boys. Appreciate Hunter for here. You already know where to go follow Hunter at, because I'm also BrodesMedia at the end of the day. So go follow him there. Join the Brodes Discord, buy that membership and all that stuff. Don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Don't forget to drop a like. Also hit the subscribe button for both of our channels. Does it very much help with the YouTube algorithm. Use the code TTPSports, $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. Great deal. Don't pass it up. Thanks everyone for tuning in whenever this is posted. Thank you, Hunter, for joining. And I will see you guys next time.